Alright, what's up, Dragon Brood? With Marvel superheroes out, there's a couple of cards that people are trying to figure out how to use, so we're going to focus on a couple of those with our single card strategy series that we like to do at the beginning of a set release. This time, though, we're going to be talking about the Scarlet Witch, because there's some really cool stuff you can do with this card, and it plays a bit differently than anything we've had before. So for starters, the Scarlet Witch is a 3-mana 2/3 mutant warlock hero, which likely only matters currently in the case of it being a hero, but it is a mutant, so maybe there's some stuff from the Ninja Turtle sets that might work with it, so something to keep in mind. And we are going to get more Marvel sets in the future, and some of those will include mutants, I'm sure. But the ability itself says instant and sorcery spells you cast with mana value 4 or greater costs X less to cast, where X is Scarlet Witch's power. And she's a 2/3. Basically, this means everything you cast is going to be 2 less if it costs 4 or more and happens to be an instant or a sorcery. Now, I think one of the things that have put people off this card is everybody immediately goes to Magic Christmas Land in some world where you have to make this card's power larger. And really, even 2 off the cost is pretty dang good. But there are some ways you can increase the power very quickly and make future spells super cheap. For example, we still have cards like Llanowar Elf, right, in Standard. So you can play an Elf on turn 1 and then play Scarlet Witch on 2, which then means if you play a land, you have access to a lot of mana that turn. You're going into turn 3 with 3 lands, 1 elf, that's 4, and potentially -2 off your spell. So you could play something that costs 6 on turn 3, which is pretty dang good. So when you're able to use 6 mana, that opens up the world for spells we wouldn't normally play, like Biogenic Upgrade, right? This thing costs 6. Again, you could play this on turn 3 and it would be really good, but then you get to distribute 3 counters among 1, 2, or 3 creatures. It's probably only going to be 1 or 2, and then double the number of counters on those creatures. So now you're talking about having the Scarlet Witch that could be, I don't know, a 4 power, 5, 6 power, and then everything else just costs 1 or 2 mana. That's actually kind of crazy. But even if you don't get the perfect draw and you just kind of play Scarlet Witch when you play her, like Germination Practicum is a card that only came out one set ago and still is pretty dang good, right? You have a 5 mana spell that would now be only a 3 mana spell, and then you get to put counters on something every turn. So that's another way you can increase Scarlet Witch's power and make future spells cheaper. Of course, there's decks that kind of want a discount on lots of expensive spells, but there are things like Jeskai Revelation running around that actually become much more powerful if you could cast them 2 turns sooner. That's not a thing we really want to deal with. We kind of hope that doesn't become a thing because those decks would be annoying, but it's something to note. You also get some interesting interactions with cards like Witchstalker Frenzy, right? It costs 4, but then if you attack, the cost reduced for the number of attackers. But with Scarlet Witch out, it only costs 2, so that's actually pretty cool to be able to deal damage for just 2 mana. But then if you attacked with Scarlet Witch, then it would only cost 1. So that's kind of a cute thing to think about. And then there's a whole series of cards that actually could generate you more mana for playing them. Like, for example, if you have a card like Big Score that only costs 4, well, it now costs 2, but it also generates some treasures. So then you're actually getting ahead to be able to get more cards and be able to continue to cast stuff. And one of the cool parts about Scarlet Witch that people don't really talk about is that it's not like other things that just reduce the cost of your next spell. She makes the reduced cost happen on every spell for the turn that meets the description or requirements. What that means is then you can chain off multiple spells if you're able to generate more resources, whether that's cards or treasure. And in this case, it's not just Big Score, right? We have other cards like Rupturous Moment, that if you played this for 4, you would actually be coming out ahead on mana by playing it, so then you can chain off a couple more potentially. Or Hit the Motherlode. This is a card that we almost don't play because it's just cost prohibitive, but there's some crazy scenarios where you could cast this cheaply, maybe hit something that only costs 2 or 3, now you generated a pile of treasure, and then the next couple of turns you just get to, I don't know, go to the moon with all the crazy stuff you can do. You could also ramp up permanently, so if something happened to your Scarlet Witch with something like Planar Engineering or any of the green 4 mana things that go get 2 lands, so then you're actually just turning that discount into permanent lands, so then you're going to have whatever mana you need anyway. Oh, and here's a fun one. There's a card, Season of the Bold, one of the seasons from Bloomborough that really never got played. But in this scenario, if you got to play it for 3 mana, well, then now you could just make 5 treasure, and now you're ahead. Or some combination of get extra cards, get treasure, so you can try to chain off a couple of things. But then there's also the aspect of, well, what if you could get creatures cheaply? Now, yes, the card does say it has to be instants and sorceries, but technically there's some ways we can work around that. For example, one of the cards we enjoy playing on the channel here in Applied Geometry, it is a sorcery, but it generates a large creature token, which then could also copy something else and make it even more insane for you to chain multiples of those off into something ridiculous. Or maybe even random encounter, right? You could play this alongside some of those types of cards. So now you're turning that cheaper mana into other bodies that could do a bunch of damage. Now those cards would go back to your hand, but that's not necessarily the case with some of the other cards we've gotten recently that also function like that. When we're talking about Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which also came out in the Marvel superhero set, right? You could get the discount and play it for 4 and then go ahead and just get those extra bodies. Now, admittedly, you would get 1, but if you did have the power increase, then you go ahead and use teamwork, and now you're just getting a bunch of creatures on the cheap. Another fun one that's actually in the same colors that goes a bit underplayed is Heroic Reinforcements. It's not the most exciting card, but if you have to play it for 2 mana, all of a sudden this becomes a real thing, especially if you're looking for blockers to maybe buy you some time so you don't have to put your Scarlet Witch in harm's way, and then you get the discount on your future spells. Or if you're able to play multiples of these on the next turn, you have a pretty good defense that your opponent may not want to try to attack through. Oh, and then another card we kind of forgot about and don't really play either, there's Michelangelo's Technique, right? This is another way to get actual 2 bodies for a very steep discount. So, and you don't even have to worry about using the sneak ability on it. You could just cast it the hard way and get things, right? Like all of these are ways that you can generate creatures without actually having to cast the creature with the discount. And it can get you access to really big creatures at a pretty steep discount in some cases. I think the biggest thing to understand about Scarlet Witch is simply the fact of we got a card that lets us play everything off schedule, right? You can get a significant discount on everything without ever pumping this creature's power. In any case where you do, well, you are then looking at playing a lot of spells for 1 and 2 mana. You're really just paying the colored mana on a lot of these costs, which is kind of crazy to think about because there's a lot of cards that we don't play because they're cost prohibitive. And it doesn't seem like much, but in many cases, if you can just get 2 mana off of those spells, they become something completely different. And if we figure out the best thing to do with Scarlet Witch, well, it's probably going to become a creature you want to remove on sight before something crazy happens the next turn. But yeah, I don't know. Y'all let me know what you think. If this card's interesting to you, or if there's other cards you want to see featured in one of these single card strategy videos, let me know. But that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.